Hi friend, David here from Learn Christmas Lighting, and you might be able to see behind me, I've got a bunch of stuff behind me because today we are continuing our series on start to finish, creating a basic Christmas light show with animation. And in this video, I'm going ahead and building my controller with a Falcon F4. So let's dive in and let's build this thing. I'm going to show you start to finish how I connect all the things that I gathered together in order to make this controller box. Then at the end, we'll talk about next week where we're going to get some control. So let's get down to business and put together this F4V3 controller. We've got a cable guard CG1500 box here. We've also got the wired watts mounting plate for Falcon and SAN devices. Now the first thing I'm going to do here is I've got the mounting plate. With it comes the screw kit. Also these screws, which are the CG1500 included screws for mounting to a wall or whatever. And then we're going to go and first lay out the big pieces. So I've got a Meanwell LRS350 power supply. I've gone on the side here. I make sure that this red voltage selector is on my local voltage, which is 115 for here in the US. And I'm just going to do a test lay, just make sure everything fits. So I've got my LRS350. I see how it lines up right here. Go on the other side. It's probably difficult to see, but I can line it up and see where the holes match up perfectly. Great. So that's my LRS350. Then I've got my F4. And we're going to go take that guy and we're going to mount him here. Now, Wired Watch shows it on their site. I don't remember which way it is. It's going to be this way, maybe. You basically want to look and make sure the lines, make sure something lines up so you can mount it. If it's hanging off the board like this, that's not going to work. Okay, so I thought he had it up in this corner. That doesn't really line up. However, this here does line up. I get 2 screws, that's plenty. So now let's go ahead and start, get ready to mount. So to get ready to mount, I want to actually hook up my wires first, at least the ones between the power supply and these input terminals here on the F4, because ultimately I can't pull this off and it's going to be difficult to get to later. So I've got here some connection wire for between my power supply and my Falcon. And I actually have some that I pre-stripped here, and I have a full tutorial on stripping wire inside of Learn Christmas Lighting Academy, and the correct ways to do it. So I've pre-stripped a black and a red. I'll just neaten these up because I did this a while ago and they've moved around a few times. And so I'm first going to hook them up to my receiving device, just as a safety precaution. Of course, with power, with electricity, always be careful. Never work with live power, etc., etc. That's very important. Okay, if you don't feel confident or comfortable working with power, please have someone who's competent look over your work. At the end of the day, it's not rocket science, but you do need to do it right, or else you'll damage equipment and or hurt yourself. Now on the F4, there is a power jumper right here on the board. Hopefully you can see it here. That says 7 to 13 volts, which is great because we're using a 12 volt setup here, so we're rocking. If you're using 5 volt, you can move that jumper to the other side. So you just pull it off with some tweezers, and then you would move it to the other side. So I'm going to go ahead here, bring in my power. So we've got V and ground on the Falcon itself. That's how it's labeled. I've opened up my terminal strips. My terminal blocks by default are going to be closed from the factory in most devices. And so V voltage is going to be red. Let's place that guy in there. Nice and firm. I see I don't have any extra wire hanging out really, which is perfect. So we'll hold that tightly, tighten it down. Tightening terminal blocks like this is very standard. Lefty-loosey, righty-tighty, which never makes any sense to me. However, it is clockwise to tighten, counter or anti-clockwise to loosen. Make sure these are nice and tight now, and you always want to do this too when you're setting up your controller. Even if you just packed it away and brought it back out, the shaking and rattling from moving can loosen these guys and really cause some problems. So I'm going to go now and hook up my power supply. Again, same deal. I've just got a screwdriver here. I'm going to trade it out for the Phillips head this time. I've got V- and V+. One of the things I do hear from time to time on people on these ones is they say, okay, you know, I've got 3 V- ports, 3 V+ ports, basically. Can I hook up more than 3 devices? What do I do with the extra ones, etc.? And truth be told, this is really just access. You can hook up as many devices as you want. Asterisk. And the asterisk there being, you can hook up as many devices as you want, but at the end of the day, it's a 350 watt power supply, which means you can hook up to 350 watts worth of stuff to it. Now, don't do that, okay? You always want to, with electricity, follow the 80% rule, which means if it's a 350 watt power supply, you want to put no more than 80% of that wattage on it when you're running your stuff at the fullest you'll run it. And if you're always going to run your lights at 50%, you can factor for that because that's going to save you a lot on the power supply, and that's what I do here. Okay, I do factor for 50%. Okay, and sometimes I run my stuff even lower, but I factor for 50. So we get all those lined up, and now it's time to go ahead, grab our Falcon screw plate kit. So grab this guy here from Wired Watts. I think there's a easy pull tab. No, there's not. That's okay. I've got a variety of screws here, which are super helpful, and spacers. So the first thing I think I'm going to do is flip this over and do the power supply. Just very gently, going to flip this guy over. And we're going to mount our power supply, which does mean well. So we find our threads there. The Meanwell LRS 350 power supplies have threads on the back of them, okay? Also, if you do have an electric screwdriver, like I do, but I'm not using it here, it does make this quicker. Please don't use a drill, though, because a drill ultimately, it's too easy to over-torque stuff. Okay, so these longer screws are too long. That's right, I remember this. So there is a shorter screw in here with the same threads. That will be perfect. Of course, just like a lot of things mechanically, as I put this together, I'm going to do 2 opposite screws. I'm not going to tighten them super tight until I know that everything's lined up, until I know I've got some threads attached on all 4 screws. Perfect. Now on to the controller. For the controller, I like to do this. I like to set it up like this because now I've got my power supply. It's heavy. It basically gives some support to the bottom, and now I can work sideways. Now, Wired Watts does give you spacers here, which are really helpful just for keeping these contacts from smashing into the board. Again, it just keeps you from over-torquing things, from potentially putting some bend on this control board, which is always good. And so I'm going to remember which holes I was aiming for. So this is one of them right here, right above the Wired Watts light bulb on my setup. I'm just going to set it up like that. Line her up. Get the nut on the other end. And as I hold the nut on the other side, hopefully you can see this. I've got the nut on the other side here. I'll just tighten it up a little bit with my fingers. And then grab a pair of pliers or something to grab that. I've just got my wire cutters here that have a plier on the end. Then I'm going to go ahead, get my screwdriver on the other side. Maybe to get started, I'll just use my hand. And we're able to get this decently tight. Could you use a nut driver or something else? Of course you could. But I didn't grab one. and this will work just fine. As you can see, it gets nice and tight. It starts to flatten out. We don't need to super tighten it just because we want to get another screw lined up first. So I'm going to find that guy here. This one lines up perfect right here. So now I can slide this out of the way. So I just slid the board out of the way. Place it through with the spacer. Excellent. And by the way, I'm not affiliated with Wired Watts. I've talked to Ken a couple times. He's a really nice guy. Emailed back and forth on the permanent house lights I did, which unfortunately he doesn't have that product anymore. It's okay. I'm not offended. And man, I just love these boards. Pre-drilled, easy to work with. These tiny little nuts are hard to get with my fingers. That's okay. We got it started at least. Hold it on there. Maybe, just maybe, it'll tighten up. Yeah, there we go. Then grab it with the old pliers. Awesome. Now you see here, I'm wiring almost everything before I even think about putting it inside the cable guard box. This is on purpose to make it fit. These wires are a little longer than they could have been. You could make them tighter, or they'll just flop like this when they're done. It'll be fine. The voltage drop in that extra 2 inches or 3 inches of wire isn't going to offend anybody. So, got that going. It's not perfectly straight, but it's lined up nice. And who cares? It's going to function the same way either way. So now, we'll go ahead and wire up the things inside the cable guard. So, what I like to do is the very last thing I do, if I can, is tighten up the board to the box, because it's the screws in the corners, the 4 in the corners, okay? And so what we want to do then is just line this guy up as best we can, see where our cables sit, and then I'm going to wire up everything else, because, like, for example, on the hot power, the power from the wall, it's really tight in there, but I have to feed the power inlet through the bottom of the cable guard box first. There's the foam in there with the holes. So I'm going to grab my power cord. Again, I got this from Wired Watts. You can get them other places. But on Amazon, they're more expensive than what Wired Watts is selling them for. And you're going to find that a lot in this hobby, actually, just to ramble on about something here while I feed this through the box. You can feed it through anywhere. I like to go, kind of close to where I'm going to come out. Get that guy fed through. You can feed through as much as you want, because you can always pull it back the other way, right? Because then I can see really good here. And I've got the little green tree. The tree is ground. White is N for neutral. And then black is going to be live. If you have different colors, consult your manufacturer or check somewhere else to find out what those colors mean. Usually it's going to be, if it's a European and or Asian color code, you're going to see brown, blue, and a green-yellow stripe. What that's going to be is if you have the green-yellow stripe, that's the ground. Blue is generally neutral. Brown is generally the hot. But do check before you wire it up. If you need help inside Warren Christmas Light Academy, let me know. I help our members personally inside there, and if not, no worries. You will find the info somewhere. So get these in here. Got them all fed through. See, wasn't that easy? No wire stripping or anything. I'm just going to tighten them down really good. I'm going to check my other wires right here. Make sure they're nice and tight. Be careful not to over torque these power connectors, because they can come off pretty easily if you really pull on them. Don't do that. Awesome. So now we're ready for pigtails. So when you buy the Falcon F4, usually the Phoenix connectors here are going to come in a little bag. So we got our bag here. We can go ahead and pull those guys out. We got them ready here. And then get our pigtails. I went with X-Connect here because ultimately X-Connect is going into the future what most people are buying. Just go with X-Connect. Unless you have a previous display, that has a different type of connector, there's no reason to use anything else. So I got 4 of these. The X-Connect is a female pigtail. That's good because that's the same as like a power outlet. And it has the threaded ring on the pigtail. So the pigtails don't have another end on them, right? They just have bare wire. And so make sure the threaded ring did not fall off in transport. Make sure it's on there. Because once you feed the cable through and wire it into the terminal block, that'll go here, you're not going to be able to put the threaded thing back on, put this back on, and this is what pulls the connector together, keeps it waterproof, keeps it locked together. You need it. So you have to undo, your terminal block if you forgot, okay? So go ahead here. I'm just going to set this up like this. Hopefully you guys can see that pretty decent. And we're going to take our connectors here, and we want to label them first. So I'm going to get out the label maker. I'm going to label these guys, okay? 1, 2, 3, and 4 is great, or whatever naming convention you have. Like if this is controller A for you, you might go 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A. Again, doesn't matter. Wired Watts does sell some pretty sweet little labels. I didn't get any here because I have a cool label maker. And I just do a cable label to wrap around these. So let me do that real quick. Awesome. So now we got those labeled. We can now go ahead, find number whatever. Let's see. So on the board itself, on this board, the 4, 1 is at the top, 4 is at the bottom. So I'm going to start with 1 because it's the highest. I'm going to feed it through. Looks like they're going to line up about here. So this looks like a good hole to use. Maybe these 2 holes right here. Feed it through the foam. Just feed it all the way through so you've got wire to work with. We'll pull them through at the end, or at least close by. And then you're going to find, again, these little terminal blocks. They're going to be tight from the factory generally. And I need a different small screwdriver. These are going to generally be tight from the factory, so you'll have to loosen them up before you get started. Now, line one of these up. You'll see on a terminal block that you're going to have where you tighten it down, then there's a little tooth that sticks out that gives you the direction that things line up. So you can just see, you plug it into the Falcon a little bit. You then see the labeling on the ports. And so we've got ground, clock, data, voltage. Now with most pixels in the Christmas light hobby, we do not have a clock. Okay, so the second one is not being used. So that means it's ground. If I hold it from the top, I go ground, skip, data, voltage. So I'm going to loosen up ground, skip, no need to loosen up the skip, the clock, data, voltage. And we're going to go ahead then and use our pigtail. Now from Wired Watts and most pretty standard pigtails, ground is going to be black. That's a very standard color coding. And check if you bought these somewhere else. Check with whomever you bought them from. As per the color coding, check their website. Or write them if they don't tell you. Then red, of course, is going to be the positive, which means data is the yellow. And that's a very standard coloring in pixels. Excellent. Tighten those down really good. And then we're just going to let that hang. Then let's do the other 3. I'm going to fit 2 per each hole here in the CG1500, though I certainly have enough port holes here that I don't have to do that. I could do all 4 in one. I can use my first one as a template. I say, okay, if I line it up with my teeth for me to the right, it's then data skip, or data ground skip, data voltage. Open that all the way. By the way, open that screw up all the way. Now you can break the plastic if you overdo it, but just using a tiny screwdriver like this and going with a small amount of torque is going to get that open real good. Then we go ahead. These are pre-tinned and pre-clipped from the factory. You know, sometimes the factory doesn't give you enough wire to work with. Like, my last one looked good. this one might be a little bit tight, and so I'm going to go ahead and give it a look. You know, I think it's going to be okay, but if it's not, you can always restrip the wires a little bit longer. You just want to watch. You don't want to see any wires sticking out where you can see it out of the terminal block, because then it has the potential that the wires could hit each other short and then cause a problem. AKA, you blow your fuse, you break your controller, you fry your lights, etc. Perfect. Now we're ready to go ahead and really assemble this guy. So go ahead, slide our board in. Making sure the cable's all clear on the bottom, real nice. Now I've got extra of my mains power here. I can just pull up and then pull through on the bottom. Hopefully you can see that really good. Yep, just like that. I don't generally, with the CG1500s, you could pull this and start ripping on it and pull these out. So I leave a little bit inside. You know, you could strain relief, you could put a big zip tie in the middle here, something like that. I just don't have a problem with it as long as you're gentle on your stuff. Then we're going to go ahead and hook up our wires. So we've got one right here, just top. Two. As you can see, I start to pull the wire out from the label side, and then that shows me which one it is, so it starts to pull it through, which I need to do anyways. Three. Four. Oops. One of my wires was not tight there. That's okay, because we can just pull it out. That's why we always verify. Awesome. And then the last thing to do is just pull a network cable up through here. So I'm going to grab one of those real quick. Now, there are multiple ways to handle this. Personally, with the cable guard boxes, I just run the network cable through every year. I just pull it out here on the very last hole. Actually, I'll go second to last, so I have space to tighten down the screws. It's a little bit tight, but it's not too bad. And then we can plug it in. If you have another network cable, you can do that as well. And we just go through, pull all these guys through, or push. As you can see, I really need to go back and retrim these. They were not good from the factory. Do that in a few minutes. But for now, just do this. And then you're ready to test. All ready to go. So now we're going to go ahead and I would test everything at this point. So plug this guy into power. Your Meanwell, just make sure it powers up. Make sure the Falcon powers up. If you have any problems, that's when it's time to get a multimeter out. Check the live to neutral and the live to ground on the AC side. Make sure you're getting whatever you're supposed to get in your side of the world. About 115 volts in the US if you're in a house, 120 to 125 if you're in a commercial building, but a house could be as low as 110. And then on the output side, we want to see 12 volts or a little higher. If you don't have anything plugged in, it could be a little bit high, but once the Falcon boots, it should sit right around 12 volts or a little bit under 11.8 or so. Falcon should turn on, be good to go. Once you've verified that, then we can tighten down the screws. So we grab our Phillips head. We've got these nice pan head, these screws that have a lag on the bottom. And then we just go ahead and we align the board up real nice. The mounting board. Get the screw started. I'm not going to tighten it all the way, once again, until everything's lined up. And if you did test things, make sure you unplug power again before you do this. Now that I've got 2 corner screws lined up, I feel confident that I can tighten this down. Next one. And last one. Having a screwdriver with a magnetic tip definitely helps, as I just dropped one in there. I was able to get it back out. Awesome. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, be sure to subscribe here. Head over to learnchristmaslighting.com to grab my free guide, which you need before you begin creating your show. And also, next week, we're going to be talking about getting control and making your first sequence. So I haven't even powered up my controller yet. Next week, we're going to power it up, plug that thing in, show you how to connect it, and get it to roll. Awesome. We'll see you guys there. Thanks.